The greatest team ever, out. The defending champs, out. Every single seed, 1 through 8, advancing for the first time ever. A Game 7 50. Take a bow, sports. Bravissimo. Let's go. Wow.
Pretty good.
What a weekend. What a weekend. And then to see Kalishaw in St. Paul, in Grand Avenue. That was just another highlight of the weekend. We'll get to that in a second. The 3 greatest words in the sports lexicon. Game 7 50. Never had it been said before, never had it happened before, the one and only Steph Curry. There's a question whether this was the crowning achievement in his career, non-championship edition. Whether, this one game and win it or go home and maybe the end of the dynasty and he shows out like that elevates him. And there's the nuts and bolts of this game. Golden State just pantsing Sacramento in the second half to the road Game 7 win. But let's start with Curry because on its head, it's a ludicrous question. He's got 4 rings, 2 MVPs. Pretty unanimously is thought to be the greatest shooter of all time. But Pablo, around the horn to you, does a Game 7 50 move him up the all-time list?
Oh, Tony, it has to move him up every possible list. To me, Steph Curry now is clearly the greatest offensive player of all time. We can parse it among point guards. We could parse it among the all-time list in general. But offensively, who can do this? Look, the greatest shooter of all time has always been a funny title to me because I've been told that shooting is important in the NBA. Certainly we understand that now since the advent of the three-pointer. This is the greatest we've ever seen at scoring the basketball. And no, he doesn't have the total numbers of LeBron, certainly, and Jordan. But in terms of get me a bucket when your second best player is Kevon Looney, like the arguments against Steph, Tony, had been that he has all of this help. The second best player on his team was Kevon Looney on the road in a Game 7. He did something that no one else has ever done. To me, it shouldn't be that controversial, and I believe it's true.
Okay.
Greatest offensive player in the history of the game.
I was expecting, now he's a top 3-point guard, now he's a top 10 player. You go even, I guess, bigger than that. As you say, shooting kind of important
the ball,
part of the NBA.
A little bit.
Kevin Blackistone on what you say from Curry.
Yeah, I would agree with Pablo. I will call him the greatest scorer of all time. That's what I was thinking as this game was going along, because one of the things you think about with Steph Curry that just jumps out to you is his sleight of build, right? He's never been the biggest guy on the basketball court. Yet, the other night, he goes for 22 points in the paint, which they said was the most he's ever scored in the paint. And I swear, I think I've seen him score more. I mean, how he can get to the rack and get the ball over bigger guys, even taking contact, is really amazing. And we know that as a three-point shooter, he's great. But here's the thing about his three-point shooting. He has redefined what three-point shooting is in the game of basketball. I mean, he is the reason that the NBA is played the way it is right now. He's the reason that college basketball is played the way it is right now, because he's been an innovator in terms of distance. And you add into that the fact that he's got arguably the best handle in basketball that we've seen in years. That makes him difficult to stop anywhere on the court.
So we're not prisoner of the moment, in one game against the Sacramento Kings defensively, not as sound as maybe the teams that Jordan played in the 90s. Kalishaw. We just heard greatest scorer ever from Blackistone. That's a list that, of course, includes Wilt and Kareem and Jordan, and Blackistone just put him on top of that. What do you say?
I'm going to go a different route, although Kevin touched on part of it. He's the greatest game changer of all time in NBA history, and that includes Wilt Chamberlain, because when he changed the game, it was rules basically to make it harder for a 7'2" athlete, and there aren't a lot of 7'2" athletes running around. An Oklahoma City executive told me a few years ago when Durant was there, and Durant was at his best. He said Durant might be the best player in the league, but he can't change the game because he's a 7-footer shooting three-point shots. Steph Curry is changing the way basketball is played at all levels because he's showing that a more normal-sized person can be a dominant scorer by shooting from distance. You turn on a college game, you see people shooting from 5 feet past the three-point line. You turn on Caitlin Clark, she's shooting from the logo. That all stems from Steph Curry showing what a 6'2" guy can do in a.
You all are providing nebulous titles to your list. Tim, take me to the top 10 players in NBA history. Take me to the top 5 point guards in NBA history. Where is Steph Curry?
The top 10, he's not there. I can't put him there because I got to throw out Larry Bird or Tim Duncan. Who do you want me to throw out? Maybe Tim Duncan, but that seems ridiculous. Second on the point guard list behind Magic Johnson.
And now we turn to Courtney Cronin. You just heard some of the more seasoned panelists on this show, at least Tim and Blackistone, say this one performance against Sacramento, well, it's better than Jordan when he scored 63 versus Mikal, Parrish, Bird, and Dennis Johnson. Go ahead, Courtney, please.
I've got a new one for you. What about the greatest adapter of all time? Think about how
right. You guys have all got these little nebulous words. Go ahead, please. Finish your thought. I'm going to get back to this.
Sure. I mean, nobody was scoring in the first half except for Steph Curry, and he scored or assisted on 66 of their points on Sunday and created 53 of their 100 field goal attempts. No one was helping him. Klay Thompson was 1 of 10 in the first half. Jordan Poole had 5 points. It wasn't until the third quarter where the rest of the Warriors decided that they wanted to show up to this game. And Steph Curry still dropped 30 points in the second half. So I think we can have the debate greatest shooter of all time, maybe the best point guard if you want to put him over Magic Johnson in that category. Top 10, I don't see how you can't put him in the top 10, especially when he keeps doing this. Every time we wanted him to up the ante, he does, and he keeps this Warriors dynasty alive. Like, that in itself is worthy of every accolade.
KB, can you give me a top 10 player in NBA history here? Is Curry on your list?
On my list, top 10, absolutely.
Torrey?
Yes, top 10. Edging Bird.
All right, so you're knocking out Larry Bird. This is like a snub in the All-Star. You got to throw somebody out. You're throwing out Bird.
Sorry.
Kalish's tempted to throw out Tim Duncan. The run continues for Golden State. You thought it was the end of the dynasty, especially when they went down 0-2. But here we are now in a dream matchup for the NBA. There's going to be clown car reactions and overreactions to Golden State Lakers. And I want a little bit more on the Warriors here. Courtney Cronin, we'll start with you. I cut you off a little bit short there. Talk to me about how you feel about this team now, maybe opposed to a week ago going into the series, and whether they can take the Lakers and go further. You feeling better?
I am, and I think that a lot of this has to do with how well they fared against the Kings of transition during the regular season and for the most part during the postseason. We know that the Lakers can get out and run. They create a lot of their offensive possessions on the break, the most of any team in the postseason. But after Golden State just got done doing what they did to this Kings team, that's their bread and butter, I have a lot of confidence in this series going 7 games, but I have a lot of confidence in the Warriors getting past the Lakers in the second round.
Blackistone.
It'll depend on what Kevon Looney can do against AD. Because with Sabonis, he just dared Sabonis to shoot mid-range jump shots, just backed off him, and Sabonis was absolutely horrible in Game 6 and not much better in Game 7. I don't think that AD will take that kind of bait. You can't lay off of him. Not only that, they rebound the basketball 1 and 2 in the playoffs right now, and that's going to be a big difference.
Pablo Torre?
No, this is an Adam Silver fever dream, this matchup. It'll go 7 games, and it'll be a challenge defensively in the ways that the Kings were not. The Lakers, after the trade deadline, have the best defense in the NBA. They are really, really good right now, but I believe the Warriors and that offense, and specifically Steph Curry himself, will be enough to win in 7.
Tim Kalisha, just a taste, looking forward to this.
I don't feel very good about the Warriors, honestly. They had a good plan against Sabonis, as KB touched on, and Fox fractured a finger in Game 4. It still took 7 games. The last time Anthony Davis was playing like this, he and LeBron won a title in the bubble. The Lakers are going to win the series.
Woo! All right, let's move on, because the Boston Bruins had an implosion for the ages. How you can go 6 months being the best team of all time, losing 12 games, and then lose 4 in a week, including Game 7 at home and overtime. It was like, how can we make this the most excruciating, embarrassing thing for our fans? You better not ignore the Panthers in this. And, of course, the Kraken beating the defending champs on the road in another Game 7 shocker. Colorado goes out. But, Tim, how did this happen? And a second question, why do the greatest teams in the history of the regular season in all sports never win?
Boston lost 3 out of 4 games at home to Florida. That just seems impossible based on how they played in the regular season. But if you look at the Bruins, in hindsight, they don't have special goaltending, and they even made a change for Game 7. And their coach, who I think is a good coach, Jim Montgomery, the only place he's coached in the NHL before this was Dallas for a couple years. He's not very experienced in the playoffs. So you got two things they did not have, and Florida had a team that led the NHL in points. They were the President's Trophy winner a year ago, so they caught Florida at the wrong
Courtney
time.
Cronin?
I think we're going to be looking at Montgomery's coaching decisions here with a magnifying glass going into the offseason, because if it wasn't playing Bergeron and Marchand in the start of Game 5, it's the goalie decision. And on top of that, just think about how much bad luck this team had. I don't want to take anything away from the Panthers because they deserve to be here. Down the stretch of the regular season, they really turned it on. They're a very talented team. But it's the President's Cup trophy, whatever you want to call it, the regular season
trophy.
that is a really big issue that we've seen play out. It's blowing a 3-1 lead. It's Marchand having the breakaway in Game 5 and then them blowing that game in overtime. It's being up 10 minutes in the final moments of Game 6 and then losing that game. And then on their home ice yesterday, losing it in the final minute. I just can't think of a more unlucky, really, really good team.
Kevin Blackistone, did this come out as unluck for you or an all-time collapse?
You know, we say here in Washington, heavy is the head that wears the President's Trophy. So this is part of that curse, I think. But here's why it's a big problem for the Bruins, because the playoff team that you saw was not the regular season team. They were plus 54 goals in the third period during the regular season. They coughed up 13 goals to the Panthers in the third period and blew leads in Game 6 and Game 7 in the third period. So this was a defensive problem for them, and obviously it built up over the course of this series, and they just couldn't overcome it.
But this redounds to the larger question that Tony started with, I think, which is why does this keep happening to the teams that are the greatest in the regular season of all time?
Yes.
And that is because the postseason is different. What these teams that have these records, what they do is they make the mistake of actually taking the bulk of the sport seriously. And it's really hard to do. To be the team that sets the record is to be a team that had broken a record that had been held for 30 years, 20 years before that. They give a title out to every single person every single year, and it's very impressive. But the thing about it is you can be an A student over 80-plus games as a head coach, as a goaltender, but when it comes to a 7-game series that you lose in overtime, guess what? Randomness and chaos is the name of this game, and it's very different from the one you just dominated.
You like that? A game of randomness and chaos? Because if you go back, just this year, you go back to March Madness, all right? 16-1. And then you had the greatest team maybe of all time, South Carolina, losing. And then you go to the NBA, and I said it before, 1 through 8. That's never happened before, advancing. And then you have this happen in the NHL. Is it because of random nature of playoffs? Is it diluted? What is it, Pablo?
I think it's both. I think it's the fact that some teams really don't care until they have to really care. And we care a lot about this.
We do appreciate the random. We'll be back. Buy or sell next.
Back to Around the Horn, coming to you from the Heineken River Deck at Pier 17.
There is no overreaction like draft recap overreaction. Who won the draft? Before anybody puts pads on. However, I'm Stunad. I need it anyway. Courtney Cronin, this is not an overreaction, just a plain reaction. You nailed this. On our last show before we took our break, you had Philadelphia making the move for Jalen Carter. Boom. Here's your bonus for that. And what's your biggest takeaway?
My biggest takeaway is that Philadelphia Bulldogs team. They don't overcomplicate the draft. I was texting with a source there over the weekend and said, you know, you can take other players from other college programs other than Georgia, and the mindset is get really good players from really good college teams and have them play for you in the NFL. I love the Jalen Carter pick with Nakobe Dean's there as well, and then Keely Ringo on day 3. You pair them with players that are already part of that 2021 Georgia Bulldogs defense, and I think it's going to be a really ferocious unit in Philly once again up front.
Kevin Blackistone, your takeaway from the draft.
Well, I just love the way we all talked about quarterbacks. Who's going to go number 1? Would Anthony Richardson go high? What about this Will Levis kid at the very end? And guess what? We had 2 running backs taken in the top 12. That was amazing to me. Bijan Robinson, who I thought in years past could have been a number 1 pick given what he did in college. And then Jahmyr Gibbs gets taken at number 12. That's the first time running backs have been selected that high in the first round since 2017.
Right, and there's a reason for that because of how teams prioritize the running back position in the NFL. Do you think, well, even in Detroit's case at number 12, it's going to work out for them? Everyone loves.
Well,
go ahead.
Right. Well, you know, they pick up Gibbs. They got rid of Swift. So I assume he's going to come right in and start. And maybe that's a little different thinking in the league about how you can use running backs.
So you appreciate it for zigging where others have zagged or vice versa. Pablo Torre, go to you.
Oh, my takeaway is the zag, though. The zagging and zagging and zagging and zagging to the point of 12 quarterbacks taken in the first 5 rounds, a record in the common draft era. And so as much as we're talking about ways that teams can find the market inefficiencies, the reality is teams are again going heavy on quarterbacks. They will again in the upcoming draft next year. And also, they don't know anything. Brock Purdy, to me, Tony, is the name I keep on thinking of because that dude was the last guy taken, and he is the most important player of all those quarterbacks seemingly taken and actually deciding meaningful football games. So, yeah, nobody knows Jack Bleep.
Thank you for that, Pablo Torre. Tim Cowlishaw.
In 3 years, I want to see how Houston did getting Stroud and Will Anderson at 2 and 3. But Courtney's right. Philadelphia, especially here in Dallas, Philadelphia kind of hovers over the entire draft, not just the picks, but the trade. Detroit drafted running back. We'll take DeAndre Swift for a third-day pick. Slide him in where Miles Sanders used to be. It was just like another perfect draft for them.
Howie Roseman, it's almost the Breaking Bad. He can't keep getting away with this. We'll move on. How the Heat went into Madison Square Garden yesterday, put a clinic on the Knicks on how to close a game out. Kevin Love outlet pass game, the Kyle Lowry finish game. Jimmy Butler was hobbled. The Knicks never went at him. And Jalen Brunson said the loss is on him. Pablo, what's the game one takeaway in this series?
Oh, that my nostalgia from my mid-90s childhood is so much better than the reality of what this game was. Jimmy Butler got hurt, Tony, and I had been raised on violence and vengeance and revenge, and the opposing coach, Tom Thibodeau, former coach of Jimmy Butler, they don't attack him. Yeah. They don't try to exploit that injury. It was baffling and antithetical to the whole theme of what the series is supposed to be.
Tim Cowlishaw.
My takeaway is that the rest of the series will be very different. The Knicks will have a different approach, and they'll probably have Julius Randle back sooner rather than later, and that'll make a huge difference. I don't know if Jimmy Butler can do this almost by himself. That's what it looks like.
We said that game 5 and 6 and 7 of last series. Courtney Cronin, you actually gave them a chance because of what Butler was doing. Here's more bonus for your picks last week. Now go ahead on this one.
Turning back the clock, the Kyle Lowry game, 18 points, 6 assists, and 4 blocks. My goodness. We know that Gabe Vincent's the one who had the dagger shot, the contested 3 that put them up 6 late in the game, but it was Kyle Lowry taking the reins of this offense, especially when Jimmy Butler rolled that ankle to help them cruise to this win. He is my biggest takeaway.
JB?
Yeah, I didn't think that the Heat had this in them without having a full throttle of Jimmy Butler, particularly in the fourth period. But they are more than Jimmy Butler, and that's got to be frightening for any NBA team, for the Knicks, for the rest of this series.
Ooh, that was a quick horn. A quick horn hurts. Kevin Blackiston and Tim Cowlishaw, who we should mention. Tim, thank you for postcards from St. Paul, Minnesota. You went viral this week showing us your look. You always look California, but you were feeling Minnesota this weekend. All right, that's it for Cowlishaw. Little Chris Cornell there. Anybody? No? Cronin, Torre, showdown next. 7 tonight in Jersey. Winner gets the second round and writes to the Statue of Liberty, which that's the 19 greatest words in the sports lexicon. Courtney, how will this 7 be won?
Tony, the fourth win is always the hardest to come by. The Rangers have the experience, they have the edge in goaltending, and they have a lineup of stars that carry a big momentum boost from Game 6, and they will carry that over into the second round.
Pablo Torre.
And they have the experience. They've won 6 of their last 7 games when facing elimination. Last year in the playoffs, they won 2 rounds when they were down 3-2. They are desperate. They rely on mistakes. The Devils are making mistakes. They'll take advantage of those mistakes.
I think the desperation may be equal going into a winner-go-home game, Pablo. Road teams have been running the rink in the NHL playoffs. You both have the Rangers on the road tonight. We'll move on. Showdown 2, Suns-Nuggets game 2. Denver. And Woody Page feeling good after game one. Pablo, do the Suns bounce back with a win tonight?
I don't think they do, because the two-man game of that guy Jamal Murray and that guy Nikola Jokic was unstoppable in the pick and roll. I don't know how you stop it. Murray had 34 points, 28 on jumpers. Good luck defending that with DeAndre Ayton.
Courtney?
DeAndre Ayton said that they don't lose twice. That's their motto. They better not, because this is not the same Nuggets team that the Suns played 2 years ago and swept in the postseason. They also need a little bit more than Kevin Durant and Devin Booker to show
Who do you got tonight, Courtney?
I have the Suns in game 2.
I can't go away from any of your predictions after you hit everything from this weekend. And that decides it. Courtney Cronin, 30 seconds to say.
One of the coolest moments you will ever see took place in the 6th round of the draft. Chris Vaughn, the assistant director of college scouting for the Dallas Cowboys, got to pick up the phone and place a call to his son, Deuce Vaughn, a running back from Kansas State that was drafted by the Cowboys. He said, "You want to come to work with me next week." Such a good feel-good moment from the Dallas Cowboys, maybe garnering some of that goodwill with everybody who doesn't like that organization. But all jokes aside, they got their running back. It wasn't Bijan Robinson as a 6th-round pick in Deuce Vaughn.
And that's Kalishaw's beat. You know Kalishaw's beat better than he knows it.
Yeah,
How about that?
They get a lot of feel-good moments in April.
23 after break. We'll see you tomorrow around the horn.